Now we are recording.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome, Eryk.
Thank you.
Welcome to Amsterdam as well.
Thanks.
Great. I want to understand about your career. I'm interviewing people who has unconventional career paths. A few questions. Maybe it's good to start with your education. Maybe you have something prior to that. It would be great to know about.
Yeah, sure. So initially when I went to school, I did a undergraduate, or I tried to do an undergraduate, and I flunked out. I was doing these things on the internet. I was doing like internet art when I was a teenager, and I wanted to do that, but nobody could teach that at the time. It wasn't established. There were no real new media art departments or anything like that were happening. And so I kind of just continued to make work after that, and studied a little bit after school or after work. I would go and I'd take night classes, and eventually, because of my work, I was invited to visit the University of Maine. So I went to the University of Maine. John Ippolito was there. He used to be the new media curator at the Guggenheim, and he was teaching at the University of Maine, and he saw the stuff that I was doing online on the internet, and he invited me to talk about it. And when I went there, it was like, oh, like there's actually people here who can do this, who can talk about this. And so I started going. I went to the University of Maine and I got a degree in new media. And then I was really interested in writing, so I got a second degree there in journalism. So simultaneous 2 degrees.
When you said internet art, what do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so in the early days of the web, there's a lot of people who are just building their own websites, right? Learning coding and building interactive experiences.
Like making the cursor sparkling.
Things like that, but also sort of interaction. I started working a lot with like glitching these systems. So we would just do interesting sort of weird experiments. We would buy like obscure domain names and create these weird experiences that nobody quite knew what they were, or it would take over the mouse and you would move one way and the mouse moves the other way. Really thinking about breaking apart that the idea of that interaction and showing how the browser kind of controlled our access to information, and challenging that a little bit too by building our own sort of alternative ways of getting around the website, for example. So there's some great examples of just artists who were reimagining what the web looked like and acted like. And so I was part of that scene. Most of my stuff was sort of using what's called ASCII art. It's like these characters, and they would be, but I would do these, I would color them, and I would take these photographs and I would sort of put those ASCII images, pretty detailed images, and I would move them around, and I would do a kind of experimental cinema almost through the browser. So there wasn't a lot of people thinking about, well, okay, like let's teach that at a university. And few art schools were really accepting that either. And part of what was really interesting about that was I was also falling into this long conversations with media activists about who has the right to access information, how do we keep the internet open. So I was having all these kinds of conversations around the ethics of technology too.
In the early days of internet, people was promised to be having no borders, there is no free to access to information. Then we are in 2025.
Right.
How was it like when you look back right now, for those days of internet to here? How do you see the changes happening?
It became a much more corporate environment after we started seeing these big social media sites. So what happened is you used to be able to produce data and people would have to find it. People would make these link lists, right? They'd make manual link lists, and you would go to a web page and they'd always have links that they would suggest for you to go check out.
It's
and
like
then,
a library.
Kind of like a library, yeah, or like a reading list. Like if I were to give you like a bibliography or here's some books to check out. And so at that time, there was also this idea that we're all communicating. We're communicating, like you said, across borders. There's never going to be war again because everyone is going to be able to talk directly to one another. and like we would never fight people if we could talk to them online. And a lot of that utopian tech promises that we see a lot and still see. And I fell for that. Like, I was a teenager, and so I was like, oh, this is going to change the world. And I really believed it was going to change the world. And it did.
It did.
Like, technology did absolutely change the world, but it wasn't this utopian paradise of liberation through technology that everyone was sort of thinking it would be in the 90s.
From the studies to your current doing experiments, did you do something that it is was life-changing for you? Like, I will always remember this from after my graduates to today. Do you have some milestones you could say to people that thinking, how do people start experimenting? Because you were curious about something and find other people to do experiments. Like,
Yeah.
It's easier maybe when you get along the way. It's easier to see the patterns maybe. I'm trying to understand, how did your experiments evolved?
I think part of the thing of working so openly online that I was doing back with the internet art has helped a lot with writing, continuing to write, and then taking a very similar approach to artificial intelligence too. And that practice of putting things out into the world, to some extent, it makes no sense because I'm putting things online that I could be getting published and probably getting paid to be published. I'm putting all my artwork online. I always have. This year is the first time that I've made a piece and not shared it for free online.
Great.
But my sense from growing up in that scene, the internet scene really, internet art scene and media activist scene of the 90s has been, let's open everything up. Let's put things out there. Let's share our information freely, and people will find it, and you'll connect to people. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. And in terms of work, there was always this like 3 question marks, like mystery of like, well, how am I going to get paid?
Yeah, kind of free labor when you are doing things online, and it makes it to be noticed. Like, how is it a better way to? There's millions of sites, and there is a better way to make a person started their art career, let's say.
Yeah.
How can they make the art exhibited more than the other things, do you think? Do you have a suggestion to young people?
I have some suggestions. I do think that social media can be helpful, but you have to use the right social media.
What is right?
So one of the things that I learned that was really frustrating as an artist and someone who was thinking about like constantly sharing my work online was that like the Instagram algorithm only rewards certain types of looks, right? Only awards certain types of images. And so if you're making images that don't fit that, you don't get the attention. And sometimes that feels like, oh, my art must be bad. No one's interested in my art. And if you think that and you stop making art because the Instagram algorithm told you that you're not making art right, well, then that's a bad social media system, right? So there's other things that are less algorithmic, that are not trying to like weigh the desire of the sort of mass audience with like your right to make the work that you want to make. And there's ways around that and exploring that. But I think that there's a lot of community-built sites. I'm using Blue Sky a lot for writing, for example. Other websites punish you for sharing links. So if you write a lot and you're on X specifically, or Facebook, they don't want people clicking on links to go off of their website, right? So if you're trying to share your work, don't do it there, right? But these places like Mastodon, Blue Sky, I don't know much about TikTok. I know that a lot of people find for a very specific type of work, they find TikTok kind of inspiring and encouraging. But it's really that question of remembering, like looking at that algorithm and what is it doing? And is it rewarding you for the effort you're giving it? Like you're sharing your work freely with this algorithm, and the algorithm is deciding, no, I'm not going to show that to people, then it's not your algorithm. So finding that, building sites, building your own platforms, or finding your own scenes. Discord is a great way of doing that. If you could build a small sort of gathering spot on Discord, or I don't know, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people use Slack. If it's Slack,
Okay,
right?
a bit
That's like,
corporate.
yeah, a little corporate, right? But something like Discord, it's still corporate,
Yeah.
but at least you have some way of inviting people, managing a community.
Mm-hmm.
You can create a space around shared interests, and so I think when you start building community, you start figuring out what the next step is together.
Maybe it's a good ask about when we mentioned community. Why are you here in Amsterdam?
Yeah.
Because there's a lovely community and you have artwork there. Can we talk about the how was the process and your art and what your themes are you exploring?
Yeah, sure. So I'm here for the AI by Design Festival. I call it AI XD. I don't know if everyone else does. But AI by Design is this, really, it is a community. It is kind of distributed. They're on Slack, they're on Discord, they're actually on multiple platforms, which is also a good strategy. Because I can sneak away, like if I'm working on something, I can see like, oh, something's going on over here, but I can also go to Discord. And there's ways of connecting to different people. But what's great about AI by Design is that it's really focused on getting people who are not necessarily the corporate tech voices about technology to come together and actually think about it differently and imagine it differently. And so these conversations have been incredible. And one of the things that it led to for me was running with Nadia Piet this event about filmmaking. So we invited animators and we invited creative technologists to come together and think about like, how do we want to use AI to make work ethically and thoughtfully, consciously, as opposed to like this unease that comes with a lot of people who are in traditional animation or illustration, rightfully so, about where this work is coming from if you use generative AI.
Yeah.
So building a different type of tool, building a type of pipeline, reimagining what AI is. When you say AI, a lot of people assume you're talking about chatbots or Mid-Journey or image generators, right, that have these unethical connotations that, we don't know where the data is coming from, or we do know where the data is coming from. Sometimes that's worse. But when you're with a group of people who are like, okay, we agree that that's bad, but we also think that there has to be a different way of doing it, then that becomes really inspired. It's inspiring to think about how people might use different parts of AI or develop their own AI tools using the technology that isn't this corporate algorithm that's trained on a bunch of data that we didn't want to give them, as opposed to building these kinds of small AI models where we train it on our own data, and sometimes it's not going to be photorealistic. It's the same thing that like, it's not going to generate faces that look like a supermodel's face the way Mid-Journey does, but it creates something interesting and different. And then once you are making something different, you start, as a community, again, figuring out, okay, it's different. That's a good thing, actually. It doesn't look photorealistic, but what does it do? And what can we make with it? Or this chatbot doesn't answer every question that we have. Maybe that's a good thing, actually. Like maybe it's interesting to talk to a data set in a different way. And so there's all these different levels of ethical engagements, and some people are more tolerant of some things than others, but we can all work together and think about like this critical lens and value that critical lens. Whereas in other communities I see it's like, don't say bad things about it, like this is the future, it's like this very gung-ho, like the tech is the point. Whereas with AI by Design, at least for me, the tech is not the point. The people and the communities are the point, and the question is, what can the tech do? What can we do with that tech?
Yeah, it's creating a safe space for people to understand each other as well using the technology. That's really nice.
Yeah, so this festival has been great conversations with a bunch of people who have very different approaches, and part of it is encouraging different approaches to imagining artificial intelligence.
You will have a talk or a hands-on session. What is your session today about?
I'm doing a talk of sorts. We're calling it a performance lecture. So I have a film that I made. It's found footage. It's some AI footage. It's like glitchy AI footage through my process of breaking the systems and then taking what they make when you break them and reusing that instead of generating like realistic images or realistic photographs. I create these like weird abstractions because the machine's failing, kind of through hacking, kind of through manipulation. And so I wrote a video essay and I narrated a video essay, and I use these visuals, these failed visuals, and found footage from archives, and put them together into a kind of visual collage, I guess you can say. I'm calling it a movie. It's called Human Movie. But when I do it live, I read the video essay over the sound and the video. So you can hear my voice and see me in person, but you see the images as well coming from that I've made. And so I'm presenting that today. And last night I presented a movie festival with Fabio Moselli, who has this incredible collection curated with Nadia from AI by Design. And I hosted that, had some conversations with the filmmakers. And again, it was about, well, how do you make a movie if you don't want to use the technology that you think is unethical? How did that make you make your work in a different way? And that's actually like really generative for creativity, because you can't just use the tool out of the box. You have to rethink every step about all this technology.
Test and experiment.
Yeah, an experiment.
I'm not sure if I ask directly, what's your profession called right now? Like, do you have a title to be created or unlabeled?
I have many titles.
Okay.
So as far as like career paths go, it's been
Currently, if I ask, like
currently I am in between a lot of work, but if I were to talk sort of at a business conference, I would say I'm a consultant. I'm an AI researcher. I study the ethics of AI and its impact on society. But I'm also an artist, and I am starting now that I don't give my work away for free all the time. I still give a lot of it away for free.
Great.
But I am working as an artist as well.
When you are saying artist, is there something that there are themes that you explore more than the other things? There are repeating things. What is it about?
I've been really thinking a lot about, I think about artificial intelligence all the time, its impact on us. Lately, though, I've been exploring these specific niches of the body in relationship with AI. How does AI understand the world without a body? Especially in this context of constantly hearing about all of its abilities, that it can make music. So when it says, oh, AI can make music, I'm like, yes, it can produce music. I like some of it. But then I wonder, well, what does it think music is? Like, what is what is it trying to articulate? Because it's not articulating music the way we do as expression, right? It's not emotional for the machine, because the machine doesn't have any emotions, and it doesn't have a body. So how does it think about people dancing or moving to music? And so I've been exploring that as a part of a broader theme, I feel, of that tension between how we talk about AI as if it has these human qualities and the definition of what it's actually doing, like the process it actually engages with, and how that's actually really different from human processes.
Non-human perspective exploration, maybe.
I think so. Some of it is this, I'm really reluctant about the claim that AI is like a human being. And part of that is because the AI is not like a human being. The AI is like an AI. And so trying to understand how that machine processes information, and then how processing information is different from thinking. These are really different they're different definitions.
Yeah.
And so teasing apart those definitions and the assumptions that get built into it when we say things about a computer as if they're human metaphors. That's why it's called Human Movie. It's this idea of like, well, what other type of movie could it be? But then it's funny because it's constantly showing at things called AI film festivals.
Yeah.
So, but a human movie is a human made that movie, right? The AI doesn't actually make a movie. So these are the types of things I'm trying to just unpack and explore.
I see. I didn't formulate this question, but I will think out loud a little bit. When you are saying how does this AI impacts the society as well. So you have been thinking about this more than me. So I want to ask your perspective on this, that sometimes now with the LLMs, it's always encouraging, it's always positive things saying. How do you see that it might affect society around this? Because we always say, oh, great, amazing, and say maybe it might affect how we communicate with normal.
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to answer that question. One is that it's sort of teaching us to avoid conflict. And sometimes I think that's really counterproductive. Like, if you think about a democracy is literally defined as people in conflict,
Yeah, it's good to
navigating
be
each
not
other.
agree all the time,
Right.
because we can see more things because perspectives. Yeah.
And then on the flip side, what it tends to do is encourage you in your own perspective. And sometimes that encouragement of your own perspective makes it harder to speak to other people about their perspective as well, because you're so convinced and you've been so assured by a chatbot or even a social media algorithm, right? Will filter out things, or they'll show you things that make you mad, because that's how it gets you to engage. So that's a type of algorithm, it's a type of AI. But then these chatbots can also reinforce beliefs. So if you phrase a question a certain way, sometimes it'll tell you, like, absolutely, that's right. But if you phrase the exact opposite position as like, is this right? It'll be like, yeah, absolutely. And so it kind of reinforces what you already believe, especially these systems that are learning from you and responding to you, looking at your past chat histories and telling you, or figuring out who you are and what type of answer you might want. That's a real risk. So complicating that, making that a bit messier, making it so that we have more friction in AI is potentially better than this frictionless experience that people have of, oh, I asked it a question, it gave me an answer.
It might feel private to people because it feels very isolated.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if you're not talking to other people who are really experiencing a life and experiencing social injustice or different economic sort of policies in different ways, then you become more isolated from the effects that policies have, even unrelated to AI. You start just thinking that the world looks, that people are feeling and experiencing the world like you are. Because, for example, if you go to a search engine, the search engine shows you 18 different perspectives on your search query. And it's not great. Sometimes they're bad, right? I'm not saying it's a better way, but at the very least, you understand these are 18 different people or groups or whatever who have different ideas about this, and I'm going to piece that together. But if you go to a chatbot, it's one summary from one perspective, which is the chatbot's perspective, which is the company's perspective that's making that chatbot. And that's a really important thing to understand too. They're not like, it's not like a conversation with a friend. It's a conversation with a company that is pretending to be your friend. And that's an important aspect of it too. So there's a lot of control over the types of messages you receive and can respond to there as well.
You are a really consultant. I'm trying to ask you about your education background, and then we are here finding ourselves discussing things. I understand.
Yeah.
You're good at your job. I want to understand. If last two questions.
Yeah.
That what are you building for your future self from this moment? All these conversations and work that you are actively doing. There is something that you are building for your future self. What is it, maybe?
I just want to be able to make art and not feel bad about it. To make
Why
art.
do you feel bad about it?
Well, because a lot of the way that whenever you work with technology, you're constantly sort of complicit with this, like, reinforcing this technology. Like, I go to conferences to talk about how AI can be harmful, and then I'm just struck by the irony that I'm still talking about AI, and I'm still talking to people about, you know, this endless conversation that's more about the technology and its risks than about the process of being creative, not necessarily about using AI, right? A lot of these conversations, like, how do you be creative with AI? But, like, I don't actually care about the with AI part. Like, the how do you be creative is a much more interesting conversation to me.
It is for sure.
Yeah.
You want to be creative and do art, and maybe use the AI.
Yeah, and I'd like to do it ethically, but for me, I can't, because I feel like so much of it is built unethically that it would be almost irresponsible for me to pretend otherwise. So when I'm trying to make things, it's almost constantly this battle that I'm in with these AI systems, where I'm trying to get it to show its own failure, to kind of reveal the way that it actually works instead of these myths about how it works. And so I'm constantly in a fight with these machines, and someday I would like there to be an ethical AI machine so that I can make, like, just a weird, surreal movie about, like, I don't know, I write novels. I used to write novels, and they were, like, extremely imaginative. I had a great experience writing this one film before I sort of got too deep into, like, the ethical considerations, but it's just this, like, short story I wrote years ago called Sarah Palin Forever, and it's about being trapped in this like political rally, this 3-hour-long political
nothing
rally,
changed.
and nothing changes. Exactly, it just keeps happening over and over again. And I feel like those types of surreal, like interventions into like, it's just like something to be more creative about and think about something that isn't AI, but AI is so present in our lives, and the harms are real too. And so until that gets resolved, it's really difficult for me to chill out and play with it in a like playful way, which is really at the heart of creativity. So I'll make music, you know, and I'll do other things, but with AI, it'd just be so nice to be able to say, I want to write a movie and I want to use AI to make it. And I want to do it ethically, because it's really like the tools are all there, but the ethical part is still like really far away from being realized, I feel like.
So if you could solve anything, you would start with this.
Oh, I'd solve other things.
Okay.
Yeah, no, if I could solve anything in the world, I think AI should be bottom of our list. But for me, given what I know about technology and how I've studied AI for years now. And so for me, that's the space where I can have an impact. And so I feel like I need to commit to really talking critically and thoughtfully about it before I can just go and play with it. But I almost admire people who can, because they're free in a way that I feel like sometimes I'm maybe a little too hard on myself.
I see. Now, I have a surprise for you because
Okay.
it's Bubbles interview.
Yeah.
So, I hope that is your favorite
Okay.
color. We have bubbles.
Great.
And we make bubbles together, and I'll ask your last question.
All right.
So, when you were a child,
Yes.
people ask you, what did you want to grow up when you grow up? Did you had an answer for this? Do you remember?
I did.
What
I'm going to
was
blow a
it?
bubble.
Yeah, let's have bubbles.
Oh, there it is. I wanted to make movies. Yeah,
Now you're doing this then.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I used to write scripts as a kid, and I would shoot these little VHS
fun.
movies with action figures like G.I. Joes and things like that, Star Wars toys.
Uh-huh.
And I would make these like stop motion animations as a kid. The stories were not very compelling, but it was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of that's still with me.
Yeah. I'm still figuring out when I ask people when I expect them to do bubbles that's not working at the same time. I'm still figuring out. Thank you for being in this interview with
Thank
us.
you.
Have a nice day. I hope you learned a lot. Bye bye.